Koboni Savage. From inside a federal prison cell, Koboni Savage ordered an act of retaliation so brutal that even seasoned investigators struggled to process what they found. 6 people, including a 15-month-old infant, perished in flames because one witness agreed to cooperate with authorities. The phone call that set it all in motion was recorded. Savage built his empire across North Philadelphia's Erie Avenue corridor in the late 1990s. A former amateur boxer who trained at Front Street Gym, he transitioned from the ring to the drug trade, establishing the Koboni Savage organization. The operation distributed hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, crack, PCP, and marijuana. But the business required enforcement. Between 1998 and 2004, Savage was responsible for 12 lives ending violently in service of protecting his enterprise. The pattern was consistent. Anyone who posed a threat to Savage's operation faced consequences. Kenneth Lassiter was the first, in March of 1998, following a parking dispute. Mansour Abdullah followed in September of 2000, after Savage suspected him of overcharging. The list grew longer with each passing year. But the most devastating act came on October 9, 2004. By then, Savage was already incarcerated at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia on drug charges. His distributor, Eugene Coleman, had been arrested and agreed to cooperate with federal authorities. Savage learned of the cooperation. From his cell, he made a phone call to his sister, Kadada. What followed demonstrated the reach of his organization, even from behind bars. Kadada showed enforcer Lamont Lewis the Coleman family home on the 3200 block of North 6th Street. Her instructions were specific. The attack should come between 3 and 4 in the morning, when everybody is in the house. She promised $5,000 for the job. Lewis and his cousin Robert Merritt Jr. arrived with 2 gas cans in the early morning hours. They kicked in the front door, fired 2 warning shots, and threw lit gasoline inside. 6 people lost their lives that night. Marcella Coleman, 54, Eugene's mother, and a prison guard at Curran Frumhold Correctional Facility. Tamika Nash, 34, Eugene's cousin, found kneeling over the infant in what appeared to be a final attempt at protection. Kaja Nash, 10 years old. Taj Porchia, 12 years old. Sean Rodriguez, 15 years old. And Damir Jenkins, Eugene Coleman's son, only 15 months old. An FBI listening device planted in Savage's cell captured his reaction to the news. He suggested someone should stop and get barbecue sauce to pour on the victim's remains. How does a man orchestrate such devastation from a prison cell? And what does it take to bring him to justice? The Philadelphia FBI Safe Streets Task Force, led by Special Agent Kevin Lewis, built their case over 14 years. Court-authorized wiretaps and the bug in Savage's cell provided critical evidence. The federal case, Criminal Action Number 2:07-CR00550 in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, moved through indictments and superseding indictments. Jury selection began in September of 2012, with opening arguments in February of 2013. Lamont Lewis, the enforcer who carried out the firebombing, testified against all defendants. After approximately 3 months of proceedings, the jury returned its verdict on May 13, 2013, guilty on all 17 charges, including 12 counts of taking life in aid of racketeering. The jury unanimously recommended death. Judge R. Barclay Surik formally imposed 13 death sentences in early June of 2013. Savage became the first person sentenced to death by the Eastern District of Pennsylvania since the federal death penalty was reinstated in 1988. The Third Circuit affirmed the conviction in a 201-page opinion on August 12, 2020. The United States Supreme Court denied review on November 15, 2021. But on December 23, 2024, President Biden commuted Savage's death sentence to life imprisonment without parole as part of a mass commutation affecting 37 of 40 federal death row inmates. Former prosecutor Steve Mellon called it a Christmas present to death row inmates. As of February 2026, Kiboni Savage is housed at ADX Florence in Colorado, the nation's most secure federal facility. No execution date was ever set. His sister Kadada received life plus 10 years. His enforcer Robert Merritt Jr. received life. Lamont Lewis, the cooperating witness who carried out the firebombing himself, received 40 years. The Savage case demonstrated that walls cannot contain certain kinds of violence. But the next case would prove that age offers no immunity from consequence either. Brandon Olivieri. At 16 years old, Brandon Olivieri carried a grudge born on social media, a .45 caliber handgun, and a willingness to use both. What happened at the corner of 12th and Rittner Streets in South Philadelphia would claim 2 young lives, one of them his own friend. The evening of October 24, 2017, began with a dispute that had festered for weeks. Olivieri, a student at Neumann Goretti High School, had been embarrassed in a previous physical confrontation with Salvatore Di Nubile. He had posted on Instagram that he wanted to pop everyone in a photo that included Di Nubile. Now, at approximately 8 o'clock, Olivieri and several friends encountered Di Nubile near his home. Olivieri pulled his weapon. Di Nubile reached for it. 3 shots were fired during the struggle. Salvatore Di Nubile, a 16-year-old junior at St. Joseph's Preparatory School, was struck twice, once in the chest, once in the back. Khalir Miller, also 16, a junior at Mastery Charter School, was struck once in the chest. Miller had arrived at the scene with Olivieri. He was not the target. He was Olivieri's own friend. Both young men were pronounced dead at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. Before police could locate Olivieri, his home was sprayed with 14 bullets in apparent retaliation. An internal police bulletin containing his name and photograph was leaked to a neighborhood Facebook group, resulting in discipline for 2 officers. On October 27th, Olivieri tearfully surrendered at police headquarters. The trial before Judge Barbara A. McDermott in Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas ran from May 14th through 17th, 2019. Security measures included bulletproof glass, protecting both judge and jury. Prosecutors presented testimony from approximately 12 eyewitnesses, surveillance video, Instagram messages, and ballistic evidence. The weapon itself was never recovered. One witness testified to throwing it into the Delaware River. Olivieri tested negative for gunshot residue. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 hours. On May 17, 2019, the verdict came. Guilty of first-degree taking of life for Salvatore Di Nubile. Guilty of third-degree taking of life for Khalir Miller. Can the justice system adequately address violence committed by someone not yet old enough to vote? Pennsylvania law required consideration of Olivieri's juvenile status at the time of the offense. The automatic life sentence was modified. On July 22, 2019, Judge McDermott imposed 35 years to life for the first-degree conviction, plus 2 to 4 years for the third-degree conviction. Total sentence, 37 years to life. 14 victim impact statements were delivered in court. Olivieri maintained his innocence. His direct appeal, number 2231 EDA 2019, reached the Pennsylvania Superior Court in 2021. The conviction was affirmed. His post-conviction PCRA appeal, number 2494 EDA 2023, was decided on December 23, 2024, again affirmed. As of February 2026, Brandon Olivieri, now 24 years old, is incarcerated at SACY Houtsdale, a medium-security facility in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. He will not be eligible for parole until approximately 2054. An active advocacy campaign maintains his innocence, but the courts have consistently ruled otherwise. A teenage grudge escalated into tragedy that night in South Philadelphia. But violence does not always come from the expected places. Sometimes it comes from the one person who should protect you most. Ruth DiRienzo Whitehead. She searched the internet for how to strangle someone. Days later, Ruth DiRienzo Whitehead used her husband's dress belt to end the life of her 11-year-old son while he slept. On the evening of April 10, 2023, Matthew Whitehead was asleep in the master bedroom of the family home on the 500 block of Privet Road in Horsham Township, Montgomery County. His mother approached him with a black dress belt belonging to her husband, Daniel. At approximately 9:30 that evening, she strangled the 6th grader from Germantown Academy. Then she locked the bedroom door, took the family's Toyota Highlander, and drove approximately 120 miles to Cape May, New Jersey. At roughly 3:30 in the morning, she drove the SUV into the Atlantic Ocean. She then walked between 3 and 6 miles to the family's beach house in Wildwood Crest, where she was later found barefoot and wearing tattered pajamas. Daniel Whitehead discovered the locked bedroom door at 7:06 the following morning. He opened it with a screwdriver. Inside, he found his son's body. When police located Ruth DiRienzo Whitehead in Wildwood Crest, she offered 4 words: "I know what I did." She confessed to investigators, claiming Matthew had been upset about the family's financial difficulties. She stated she did not want Matthew to grow up with these struggles. But the digital evidence told a different story. In the days before the act, she had searched for how to strangle someone and researched mental illnesses that led mothers to end the lives of their children. Text messages showed discussions about listing the family's $800,000 beach house. Prosecutors argued that Ruth DiRienzo Whitehead resented her husband for their financial troubles. Their assessment was blunt. She hated her husband more than she loved her son. The bench trial before Montgomery County Judge William R. Carpenter ran from February 12th through 15th, 2024. Defense attorney Eugene P. Tenari presented an insanity defense. Expert witness Dr. Kenneth Weiss testified that DiRienzo Whitehead suffered a psychotic break, diagnosing altruistic maternal filicide. But prosecution expert Dr. John O'Brien found no documented mental health history to support the claim. He characterized her as calculating and methodical. What drives a mother to harm the child she brought into this world? On February 15th, 2024, Judge Carpenter delivered the verdict. Guilty of first-degree taking of life, the insanity defense was rejected. Sentencing came the following day, February 16th. Under Pennsylvania law, first-degree conviction carries a mandatory sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. DiRienzo Whitehead addressed the court before sentencing. "Only a monster would do something like this," she said. "I'm so sorry." Defense attorney Tenari indicated an intent to appeal. As of February 2026, no appellate outcome has been publicly reported. Ruth DiRienzo Whitehead remains in the Pennsylvania State Correctional System, serving a sentence that will never end. Matthew Whitehead was 11 years old, a 6th grader with his whole life ahead of him. His passing came at the hands of the one person entrusted above all others to protect him. Individual acts of violence devastate families. But what happens when 4 armed men enter a single location with intention? The answer lies in a row house on Lex Street, and the 7 lives that ended there. Dawood Farouqi and Sheehan Black. 4 masked gunmen. 10 people ordered face down around a kerosene heater. An execution-style attack that would become the deadliest mass taking of life in Philadelphia history. December 28, 2000. An abandoned row house at 816 North Lex Street in the Mill Creek section of West Philadelphia. Inside, 10 people gathered. Outside, 4 men approached with weapons drawn. What followed lasted only minutes, but would haunt the city for years. The trigger was remarkably mundane. Sheehan Black had traded cars with a man named George Porter. Black then traded Porter's vehicle to Dawood Faruqi in exchange for a Glock pistol. When Porter demanded his car returned, a dispute erupted. The 4 gunmen went to confront the group. They entered the row house, herded the occupants into a single room, and ordered them to the floor. Then Dawood Faruqi's mask fell off. The victims could now identify him. According to testimony, Faruqi announced they had to eliminate these witnesses. "They know where I live," he said. "I've got kids." He opened fire. The others followed. 7 people lost their lives. George Porter, approximately 19 years old. Samuel Harris Jr., 15 years old, the youngest victim. Tyrone Long Jr., 18. Calvin Helton Jr., 19. Ronette Abrams, 33. Edward Sudler, 44. Alfred Goodwin, 54. 3 people survived. Yvette Long, approximately 33. Bruce Carter, 45. Craig Kilby, 37. The investigation that followed would become a case study in wrongful prosecution before arriving at justice. In January of 2001, police arrested 4 innocent men based on a false confession. Jermel Lewis, Sekon Yuk, Hezekiah Thomas, and Quiante Perrin were charged with the 7 deaths. They spent 18 months imprisoned. Remarkably, Sheehan Black had actually confessed to police twice, in January and February of 2001. Both times, investigators deemed him not credible. It was not until July 10, 2002, that charges against the wrongly accused were dropped. They later received a $1.9 million settlement. How does a system designed to deliver justice imprison the innocent while dismissing confessions from the guilty? On November 26, 2002, District Attorney Lynn Abraham announced charges against the actual perpetrators: Dawood Faruqi, Sheehan Black, Khalid Faruqi, and Bruce Vaney. All 4 were already in custody on unrelated matters. Sheehan Black pleaded guilty in February of 2003, with the death penalty waived in exchange for his cooperation. On June 23, 2003, he received 7 consecutive life sentences without parole. When asked at SCI Green Prison whether he was sorry, Black shook his head no. Dawood Faruqi proceeded to a 13-day jury trial. On March 8, 2004, the jury convicted him on all counts. He then accepted a plea deal waiving all appeal rights. His sentence: 7 consecutive life sentences plus 365 years. His brother Khalid received an identical sentence. Bruce Vaney, who cooperated with authorities, received 15 to 30 years. He was paroled in March of 2019. As of February 2026, both Dawood Faruqi and Sheehan Black remain in Pennsylvania state prisons serving life without parole. They surrendered all rights to appeal. The 4 men wrongfully arrested had their lives disrupted for 18 months. The 7 victims never came home at all. The Lex Street Massacre demonstrated how quickly violence can claim multiple lives. The next case would show how quickly it can claim one, and the devastating ripple effects when that life belongs to someone who swore to protect others. Miles Pfeffer. He had turned 18 just 5 weeks earlier. On a February evening in North Philadelphia, Miles Pfeffer would take the life of a police officer in a manner so brazen that security cameras captured every moment. Then he would attempt to steal the dying officer's service weapon before fleeing into the night. February 18th, 2023. Approximately 7 in the evening. Temple University police officer Christopher Fitzgerald, 31 years old, an 8-year veteran and father of 4, was on patrol alone near the campus border at 17th Street and West Montgomery Avenue. He spotted 3 individuals dressed in black. Miles Pfeffer, 18, his younger brother Dean, 16, and a 17-year-old friend. 2 of them fled. Fitzgerald pursued Pfeffer on foot, caught him, and ordered him to the ground. A physical struggle followed. Then Pfeffer pulled a handgun and fired 6 times. Security camera footage showed him standing over the fallen officer, firing additional rounds, including at least 1 to the head at point-blank range. But Pfeffer was not finished. He attempted to take Fitzgerald's service weapon. He went through the officer's pockets. Then he fled, carjacked a motorist at gunpoint, crashed the stolen vehicle, and called his mother, who drove him to the family home in Bucks County. Officer Fitzgerald was pronounced dead at Temple University Hospital at 7:27 that evening. It was the first time a Temple University police officer had ever been harmed fatally in the line of duty. United States Marshals, Pennsylvania State Police, and Philadelphia Police arrested Pfeffer the following morning at his mother's home. In a tradition honoring fallen officers, Pfeffer was placed in Fitzgerald's own handcuffs. Why does an 18-year-old, with his entire future ahead of him, choose to take the life of a stranger who posed him no mortal threat? Pfeffer's younger brother Dean was detained at the scene and later testified against him. The trial before Judge Glenn Bronson in Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas ran from June 23 through 25, 2025. Prosecutors presented the security footage, witness testimony, and physical evidence. The defense argued Pfeffer was a frightened teenager who panicked. District Attorney Larry Krasner declined to seek the death penalty, a decision that devastated the Fitzgerald family. The jury deliberated for approximately 18 to 30 minutes. On June 25, 2025, the verdict was returned. Guilty on all charges. Sentencing came the same day. Life in prison without parole, plus 22.5 to 45 years consecutive. Judge Bronson addressed Pfeffer directly. "There is no graver offense than taking the life of a police officer," he said. "We put you in the category of the worst of the worst." When asked if he had anything to say, Pfeffer responded simply, "No, Your Honor." Christopher Fitzgerald was posthumously promoted to sergeant. The 1700 block of West Montgomery Avenue was renamed Christopher Fitzgerald Way. The Bustleton Post Office was renamed in his honor by legislation signed by President Biden in November of 2024. Temple University committed to providing free tuition for Fitzgerald's 4 children. A wrongful death civil lawsuit remains pending against Pfeffer, his parents, and his mother's boyfriend. As of February 2026, Miles Pfeffer, now 21 years old, is serving life without parole plus 22.5 to 45 years in the Pennsylvania state prison system. Sergeant Fitzgerald's children will grow up without their father. And on the corner where he fell, the street now bears his name. If you're liking this video and you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We drop new cases every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Justin Moan. He uploaded a 14-minute video to YouTube in which he displayed his father's severed head, declared himself the acting president of the United States, and called for the public execution of federal officials. The video was viewed approximately 5,000 times before the platform removed it. His father had been a 20-year employee of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. January 30th, 2024. The family home at 145 Upper Orchard Drive in Middletown Township, Bucks County. The area is commonly known as Levittown. Justin Moan, 32 years old, a Penn State graduate and self-published author with increasingly radical anti-government views, shot his father, Michael F. Moan, in the head with a 9mm Sig Sauer pistol he had purchased the previous day. Michael Moan was 68 years old. He had spent 2 decades as a federal employee, but Justin Moan was not finished. Using a kitchen knife and machete, he decapitated his father. The autopsy would later confirm that Michael Moen was shot first and decapitated post-mortem. Then came the video, titled Moen's Militia, Call to Arms for American Patriots. The 14-minute recording showed Justin Moen displaying his father's severed head. He declared himself the new acting president of the United States. He called his father a traitor. He urged militias to harm federal employees. He named specific federal officials for what he termed public execution. YouTube removed the video after approximately 5,000 views. But by then, Justin Moen had already fled. He drove his father's car approximately 100 miles to Fort Indiantown Gap, a Pennsylvania National Guard training center. There, he climbed over barbed wire fencing with the stated intention of mobilizing the National Guard against the federal government. He was arrested without incident, carrying the loaded pistol, survival gear, ammunition, knives, and a USB device. The device contained photographs of federal buildings and instructions for constructing explosive devices. The FBI had received 4 prior warnings about Moen's social media posts between 2018 and 2023. None had resulted in intervention. What warning signs does a person exhibit before committing an act of violence this extreme? And why do those warnings go unheeded? A competency hearing on August 1st, 2024, produced conflicting expert testimony. Defense expert Dr. John Markey diagnosed delusional disorder. Moen had claimed to be the Messiah, a King David-like figure, and the former Tsar of Russia. Prosecution expert Dr. Kelly Chamberlain found him intelligent, calm, and socially appropriate. Judge Stephen A. Core ruled Moen competent to stand trial. The bench trial ran from July 7th through 11th, 2025. Over 200 pieces of evidence and more than 15 witnesses were presented. Moen testified in his own defense, claiming a failed citizen's arrest and self-defense. Defense attorney Stephen Jones acknowledged that Moen did unspeakable things, but contested the first-degree charge. On July 11, 2025, Judge Core delivered the verdict: guilty on 13 charges, including first-degree taking of life and 2 counts of terrorism. This marked the first-ever conviction under Pennsylvania's terrorism statute. Moen was found not guilty only on lesser theft charges related to his father's car. Sentencing came the same day. 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus up to 40 additional years consecutive. Moen showed no remorse. He called his actions justice. He suggested he be used in a prisoner swap with Russia. Judge Core called the case an indictment on the mental health system. As of February 2026, Justin Moen is serving 2 consecutive life terms without parole in the Pennsylvania state prison system. The video he uploaded has been scrubbed from most platforms, but its contents remain seared into the memories of those who watched before it was removed. His father, Michael Moen, served his country for 20 years. His son repaid that service with violence and spectacle. The Moen case represented a collision of extremism and mental instability, but sometimes violence requires no ideology at all. Sometimes it hunts through the streets, targeting the vulnerable, leaving a trail of grief that a city cannot ignore. Antonio Rodriguez. They called him the Kensington Strangler. Over a span of 10 weeks in the fall of 2010, Antonio Rodriguez stalked the streets of one of Philadelphia's most troubled neighborhoods, targeting vulnerable women. 3 lives ended, and a DNA testing backlog meant that at least one of those deaths might have been prevented. Kensington, the Badlands, a section of North Philadelphia where poverty, addiction, and desperation converge. In October of 2010, the neighborhood became a hunting ground. Elaine Goldberg was 21 years old. A nursing student at Gwynedd Mercy University, she had struggled with opioid addiction. Her body was found on November 3, 2010, in a vacant lot on Ruth Street. She had been strangled. She had been sexually assaulted before and after her passing. Nicole Piacentini was 35 years old, a mother of 4 from Port Richmond. Her body was found between November 12th and 13th at an abandoned house near Jasper and Cumberland Streets. The method was identical: strangled, sexually assaulted. Casey Mahoney was 27 years old, originally from Asheville, North Carolina. Her body was found on December 15th in the woods near railroad tracks. Rodriguez had used a condom this time, aware that police were linking the crimes through DNA evidence. But he left the condom at the scene. Antonio Rodriguez was born on October 28, 1988, in Philadelphia. Adopted by a white family, he grew up on the 3400 block of Masher Street in Kensington. He had a history of drug addiction and mental illness. He also had a felony drug conviction that required his DNA to be entered into the national database. That entry occurred on October 25, 2010. Elaine Goldberg's body would be found 9 days later. But Philadelphia's crime lab had a backlog of more than 5,000 cases. Rodriguez's DNA was not processed until January of 2011. Casey Mahoney had been found dead on December 15th. If the system had worked as intended, could Casey Mahoney still be alive? On January 17th, 2011, police held a press conference naming Rodriguez as their suspect. During the conference, a 911 tip placed him in a house on the 3300 block of Mutter Street in Kensington. Homicide detectives and United States Marshals arrested him in the kitchen. He confessed, without much emotion, to 4 homicides. DNA evidence linked him conclusively to 3. The arrest did not immediately clear the case. On December 21, 2010, police had arrested Noel Quintana, a 48-year-old man, and charged him with all 3 slayings. Quintana spent nearly 4 years imprisoned before his acquittal on September 30, 2014. The city later paid more than $1 million in settlements related to his wrongful arrest. Rodriguez's bench trial before Judge Jeffrey P. Meinhardt lasted 2.5 days. In August of 2012, he had waived his right to a jury in exchange for the death penalty being removed as a possible sentence. Prosecutor Carlos Vega presented the DNA evidence. The statistical probability that the evidence came from someone other than Rodriguez was 1 in 70 quintillion. On August 16, 2012, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts: 3 first-degree homicides, 3 rapes, 3 counts of involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, 3 counts of abuse of corpse. Sentencing was immediate: 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus additional concurrent sentences for the sexual assaults and abuse of corpse. Judge Meinhardt addressed Rodriguez directly. "You not only violated these young women while they were alive," he said, "you violated them while they were dead." The Pennsylvania Superior Court rejected his appeal on June 17, 2014. Multiple subsequent appeals have also been denied. As of February 26, Antonio Rodriguez, now 37 years old, is incarcerated at SC Point Rockview in Center County, Pennsylvania. He has no possibility of parole. Elaine Goldberg was 21. Nicole Piacentini was 35. Casey Mahoney was 27. Their families carry the loss. And the question of whether a functioning system might have saved Casey Mahoney remains unanswered. Rodriguez preyed on the vulnerable in the shadows of abandoned buildings. But not all violence hides. Sometimes it unfolds in broad daylight, in a retail store, in front of security cameras, taking the life of someone who swore to serve and protect. Carlton Hipps and Ramon Williams. Over 50 shots in approximately 30 seconds. A police officer who deliberately drew fire away from civilians. And 2 half-brothers who walked past a marked patrol car without noticing it, then opened fire when they realized their robbery had a witness. March 5, 2015. Approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. The GameStop store at Hope Plaza Shopping Center, 2101 West Lehigh Avenue, North Philadelphia. Officer Robert Wilson III, 30 years old, an 8-year Philadelphia Police Department veteran and father of 2, had entered the store in full uniform. He was checking security. He was also planning to buy a video game for his son's upcoming birthday. His partner, Officer Damian Stevenson, waited in the marked cruiser outside. Carlton Hipps and Ramon Williams were half-brothers who shared a mother. Both lived on Hollywood Street in the Brewery Town section of Philadelphia. Hipps had 6 prior arrests and had served 5 years for a 2004 robbery. Williams had 2 prior arrests. That afternoon, they approached the GameStop with semi-automatic handguns drawn. They walked past the marked police cruiser. They did not notice it. Inside, they announced a robbery. Then they saw Officer Wilson. What followed lasted approximately 30 seconds. Over 50 shots were exchanged. Wilson, recognizing the danger to employees and customers, deliberately moved away from cover at the counter. He drew the gunfire toward himself. No employee or customer was harmed. Wilson was struck multiple times, including in the head. As the suspects fled, Officer Stevenson shot Hipps in the leg. Hipps collapsed outside the store, begging officers not to harm him. "Please don't kill me," he said. Williams ran back inside, removed his hoodie, and attempted to pose as a customer. Witnesses immediately identified him. Officer Robert Wilson III was pronounced dead at Temple University Hospital. What compels someone to take a life over the contents of a retail store? Both suspects were arrested at the scene. Hipps was handcuffed using Wilson's own handcuffs, a law enforcement tradition for fallen officers. A search of their home yielded an AK-47 rifle. Williams gave a full confession. On June 25, 2018, before Judge J. Scott O'Keefe, both men pleaded guilty to first-degree taking of life plus 8 additional armed robberies. The sentence, life without parole plus 50 to 100 years consecutive for each defendant. Both waived all appeal rights. District Attorney Larry Krasner called it death by incarceration. Judge O'Keefe called them despicable. Williams addressed the Wilson family. "I robbed these 2 young men of their father," he said. "I'm sorry for this." Hipps made no comment. Officer Stevenson, Wilson's partner who had shot Hipps in the leg, also testified. "I spared your life," he told the defendants, "but you didn't spare his." Robert Wilson III was posthumously promoted to sergeant. He was awarded the Philadelphia Medal of Valor, which was subsequently renamed in his honor. In May of 2016, President Obama presented the Wilson family with the Presidential Medal of Valor, the first Philadelphia officer to receive this distinction. As of February 2026, both Carlton Hipps and Ramon Williams remain in the Pennsylvania state prison system serving life without parole plus 50 to 100 years. No appeals are possible. They surrendered that right when they pleaded guilty. Sergeant Wilson's children lost their father that afternoon in a GameStop. The video game he intended to purchase for his son's birthday was never bought. Hipps and Williams acted on impulse that afternoon, a robbery gone wrong. But what happens when the system itself enables violence? When a judge's leniency releases someone who should remain imprisoned? The answer lies in a case that crossed state lines and claimed 7 lives. Keith Gibson. 7 people, 2 states. 1 man who should never have been on the street. Keith Gibson called himself the Beast. Among his victims was his own mother, and a judge's decision to release him after 31 days made 5 of those deaths possible. Gibson was born in 1982 in Philadelphia. His mother, Christine Gibson, had been 15 years old at his birth. By 2008, he had accumulated 9 prosecutions and more than 12 parole violation arrests. On July 6, 2008, Gibson shot and took the life of Stanley Jones, 36 years old, during a robbery in Edgemoor, Delaware. He was convicted of manslaughter in 2010 and sentenced to 20 years. He was paroled in June of 2020. He violated parole. He returned to prison. He was released again on December 20th, 2020. In February of 2021, Gibson violated parole again by leaving Delaware. Probation officers urged Judge Vivian L. Medinilla to re-imprison him for the remaining 6.5 years of his sentence. On April 27, 2021, Judge Medinilla sentenced Gibson to 31 days, time he had already served. She released him. 5 of his next 6 victims would lose their lives after that release. The spree had already begun. On January 28, 2021, Gibson shot and took the lives of Eric Flores, 50, and Roy Caban, 42, in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. On February 8, 2021, he went to his mother's workplace. Christine Gibson was 54 years old. She worked as a mental health counselor and supervisor. She had told friends that if anything were to happen to her, her son would be the one responsible. Keith Gibson ended her life at that location. Then came the release that should never have occurred. On May 15, 2021, Leslie Lyseth Ruiz Basilio, 28, in Ellesmere, Delaware. On June 5th, Christine Lugo, 41 years old, in the Fair Hill section of North Philadelphia. On June 5th or 6th, Ronald Wright, 42, in Wilmington, Delaware. Also in Wilmington, a teenager named Bilal Al-Mansouri was shot but survived. How does a system designed to protect the public repeatedly release someone with this history of violence? On June 8, 2021, Gibson entered a Rite Aid pharmacy in Wilmington to commit a robbery. A store clerk slipped a GPS tracking device into the cash. Police tracked the signal and found Gibson nearby. He was wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a loaded revolver, a knife, narcotics, and distinctive frangible ammunition. Forensic analysis matched that ammunition to fragments recovered from multiple crime scenes. The Delaware trial ran from October 31st to November 14th, 2023. In Newcastle County Superior Court, before Judge Ferris W. Wharton. The defense called no witnesses. The jury convicted on 25 charges, including 4 counts of first-degree taking of life and 1 count of attempted taking of life, after approximately 6 hours of deliberation. On March 8, 2024, Gibson was declared a habitual offender. His sentence, 7 life sentences without parole plus 296 years. Judge Wharton addressed Gibson. "I have given you as much as I can," he said. "It is not enough." 4 additional homicide cases remain pending in Philadelphia. On September 24, 2024, Gibson appeared at a Philadelphia preliminary hearing and was charged with contempt after interrupting testimony at least 10 times. The extradition timeline remains unclear. Gibson filed a notice of appeal to the Delaware Supreme Court. Briefing was completed by December of 2024. As of February 2026, the appeal appears to remain pending. Keith Gibson is currently incarcerated in a Delaware state prison facility, serving 7 life sentences plus 2, 196 years. He awaits extradition to Philadelphia for 4 additional trials. His mother, Christine Gibson, told friends she feared her own son. She was right to be afraid. Gibson's case exposes systemic failure at multiple levels, but not all violence stems from broken institutions. Sometimes it stems from something far more intimate, a secret someone would rather end a life than reveal. Kylan Pratt. He shot his partner once in the neck, severing the spinal cord. Then he wrapped the body in cloth, plastic, and duct tape, transported it to Fairmount Park, and set it on fire. The corpse was so badly burned that identification required DNA analysis from a toothbrush. Prosecutors described the act as a hate crime. The motive was a secret Kylan Pratt was willing to take a life to protect. Nasir Johnson was 20 years old, a 2018 graduate of the Charter High School for Architecture and Design. He worked as a home healthcare aide. He was openly gay, and he was in a romantic relationship with Kylan Pratt. Pratt, born September 9, 2001, used the alias 29th Street Rich. He resided on the 2900 block of West Oxford Street in the Brewery Town section of North Philadelphia. He dated both men and women, but he did not want anyone to know about his relationship with Johnson. Johnson had threatened to make the relationship public. In the early morning hours of February 17, 2022, inside Pratt's home, Pratt shot Johnson once in the neck with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The bullet severed Johnson's spinal cord. What followed demonstrated a determination to eliminate all evidence of what had occurred. Pratt wrapped the body in cloth, then plastic, then duct tape. He transported the remains approximately 1 mile to a cobblestone trail in Fairmount Park, near Brewery Hill Drive and Kelly Drive. There, he set the corpse on fire. Cell phone records would later show Pratt at Fairmount Park on both February 19th and 20th. On February 20th, 2 dog walkers discovered charred human remains behind a tree. Prosecutor Sydney Pope would later describe it as the worst burned body she had ever seen. Identification proved impossible through conventional means. Investigators obtained Johnson's toothbrush and comb from his grandmother, Cynthia Johnson. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Nasir. The investigation traced the crime back to Pratt's residence on Oxford Street. Blood was found on the ceiling and floor of his bedroom. The carpet had been recently bleached. The weapon was recovered from the home. Cell phone records confirmed Johnson had traveled to Pratt's home via Uber, and Pratt's Google search history revealed queries including murdering in cold blood, traits of a psychopath, and news coverage of the body's discovery. What secret is worth taking a life to protect? Pratt was already in custody on unrelated offenses when formal charges were filed between June 15th and 21st, 2022. The charges included first-degree taking of life, abuse of corpse, tampering with evidence, and possession of an instrument of crime. The trial concluded on September 27th, 2024, in Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. Prosecutor Sydney Pope presented the evidence. The verdict, guilty on all counts. Pope addressed the nature of the crime directly. "This is an individual who was taken because he was gay," she said, "and because the man who took his life did not want anyone to find out about their relationship." Judge Giovanni O. Campbell imposed the sentence between September 27th and 30th, 2024. Life in prison without parole, plus a consecutive 4.5 to 9 years. Pratt was also ordered to pay nearly $18,000 in restitution to Johnson's family. As of February 2026, Kylan Pratt, now 24 years old, is serving life without parole in the Pennsylvania state prison system. No appeals have been publicly reported. Nasir Johnson was 20 years old. He lived openly and honestly. He deserved better than to become a secret someone wanted buried. His grandmother provided the DNA sample that identified his remains. She knew who her grandson was. Kylan Pratt was willing to end a life rather than let anyone else know. 10 cases, 10 defendants who will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. The victims they left behind, from a 15-month-old infant to police officers in uniform, deserved far more than the justice these sentences can provide. Thanks for watching. Click here for the next video.